Okay, I'm going to get started this morning by just welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice to see all of you guys here. Welcome to everyone online as well who's joining us. This is the first day of a 5-day course where I'm going to be guiding you guys in developing a foundation in the path to enlightenment, understanding the teachings of the Buddha so that you can make your way towards this enlightened mental state. You're going to be learning a lot of things this week and exposed to a lot of things. And we're going to kind of cap it off on Friday with inviting you guys to a field trip. If you guys would like to go out to some temples outside the city, I invite students to go to a forest temple and a temple that's up on top of the mountain, kind of like a field trip or a classroom without walls, where I can tour you guys around the temple and help you guys to understand the artwork, the architecture, the symbolism. Because after you've been studying for about 4 days or so here, then it's kind of a nice time to go visit some temples, because if you understand the symbolism, the artwork, and the architecture, the temple kind of speaks to you. It kind of comes to life. So I'll take you guys through that tour if you guys would like to come on Friday. Everybody and anybody's welcome, even if they're not here for the course. You'll see other people coming in and joining us at different times. So welcome to all of you guys here. Welcome to everyone online. As I mentioned, the way that I like to start with helping students to understand the path to enlightenment is share with you how to approach the teachings of the Buddha. To understand the teachings of the Buddha is to understand that his teachings aren't based on any belief. There is no belief in his teachings. In order to be able to make your way to enlightenment, where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, and it no longer experiences any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all these feelings and others are completely eliminated from the mind, because you've eliminated the causes and conditions that are producing it. You'll notice that you have focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. Your personal and professional relationships will be really blossoming. They'll be at ease because you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile any longer. You won't even be in a bad mood by the time you get to enlightenment. It's impossible for an enlightened being to experience a bad mood because they've uprooted the causes and conditions that produce it. But to get to this mental state, it's important that you don't believe any of the teachings. Don't believe anything that I say. Don't believe anything that anyone else says. Don't believe anything that you see written in the books that I share, because belief isn't going to get you to enlightenment. In order to get to enlightenment, you need to cultivate wisdom. We need to be able to understand the natural laws of existence. And the way to cultivate wisdom is that you learn something, you investigate it, you examine it, you reflect on it to independently verify whether it's true or it's false, and then you practice it, integrating it into your life in order to train your mind. The Buddha essentially figured out these 10 individual pollutions that are in the mind and how to uproot those through various tools and techniques. And when you uproot these pollutions, purifying the mind, you'll experience more and more of the qualities of enlightenment. And you'll see your mind's getting closer and closer to that, because you know in situations where you were once angry or frustrated or agitated or annoyed, and you're not going to be experiencing that anymore. In certain situations, you'll notice that your mind is gradually moving to this enlightened mental state. With belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because somebody told you to believe it, and maybe they convinced you to believe it, or maybe you convinced yourself to believe it. But in order to get to enlightenment, you need to cultivate wisdom about the world around you. So the Buddha didn't teach the way the world should be. He didn't teach a bunch of rules or commandments. He explained the way the world is, because when you're having anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, this is the mind struggling. It's having difficulties because it lives in a world that it doesn't understand. And in order to get to enlightenment, you need to cultivate wisdom about what's called the natural laws of existence. There's certain natural laws that the Buddha taught that if your mind is unaware of these, then you're going to struggle and have difficulties. That's where the anger and the frustration is coming in. Just like when we were children, we had difficulties and struggles with the natural law of gravity. We fell down, we hit our head, we bumped our elbows, we maybe started bleeding on our knees or our elbows. We had all kinds of problems with this natural law of gravity. We eventually got to the point where we awoke to the natural law of gravity. We gained wisdom of this natural law. And when we did, we gained this wisdom and this ability to navigate the world more peacefully and more harmoniously. Because when we lacked wisdom, we made unwise decisions as a child related to this natural law of gravity. But slowly but surely, as we gained this wisdom, we started making wiser and wiser decisions. And that's where now we're at the point where we can climb a ladder, we can ride a bicycle, we can get on motorbikes, we can get on airplanes and fly all over the world, because we fully understand this natural law of gravity. So we make wise decisions related to it. But we never believed that the natural law of gravity existed. We see it for ourselves. We can see through our own observation and our own experience that, yeah, there it is. That's the natural law of gravity. We can see that. So we started making wiser decisions, like tying our shoes a bit tighter. We started looking at the surface of the sidewalk. We stopped being so giddy and bouncing around like a little kid all the time. And now we don't fall down and we don't have difficulties and struggles with this natural law because we fully awoke to it. We gained wisdom of it. There's other natural laws besides the natural law of gravity. It's affecting you whether you're aware of these natural laws or not. And this is where the mind experiences the struggles and difficulties because it lacks wisdom of these natural laws. So like when a relationship ends, when you have a friend or a family member who dies, or maybe a boyfriend or girlfriend, you guys break up, you really struggle during this period of time. You get angry or frustrated, or you feel guilty or shameful or sorrowful, or you grieve. You're not a bad person because this is being experienced, but it's because the mind is untrained. And with the mind being untrained and lacking wisdom of how to do that, you'll continue to struggle and have difficulties in different parts of your life. But the teachings of the Buddha, through learning them, examining them, investigating them, through reflecting on them to independently verify whether they're true or they're false, and through practicing them, integrating them into your life to train the mind, you'll be able to see that you can get to a point where your mind doesn't experience that anymore. It's not your love that's causing the grief and the sorrow and the sadness. It's not because you care about these people. You're going to see tomorrow when I teach you the very first teaching of the Buddha in a way that you can independently verify that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. It's your own mind that's causing the anger and the sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings. It's not the outside world. But the mind, with its lack of wisdom, will firmly believe that it's the outside world that's causing these feelings. And if it was the outside world that was causing these feelings, that means you could never eliminate them because you can't control what other people do. But because your mind is actually causing these feelings, you can actually eliminate them through training of the mind. And I'm going to help you with that along your journey. But it's important that you don't believe anything, because belief, you don't know what's true or false. You need to awaken to the wisdom of these natural laws. So essentially what a teacher is I'm like a tour guide, pointing out for you the things that you need to learn and presenting to you the things you need to learn. But it's you as the student who's doing the work to be able to actively learn the teachings. The Buddha teaches you to listen to the teachings with eager ears, where you're actively learning the teachings. That's what's going to help you to be able to understand them and then actually make real improvement to your life. If you're not actively learning in a class, if you're not actively learning through maybe books and other resources like this, like nowadays we have videos and podcasts and things like this, you're not going to be able to actively make your way to enlightenment. You're not going to be able to just believe your way to enlightenment. You're going to need to actively learn and develop and train the mind. So you are the one who is on your own independent journey. You're not a believer, you're not a follower, you're not a devotee or anything like this. You're an active, independent learner who's on the path to enlightenment. You're a practitioner who's making your way through the cultivation of wisdom with a teacher pointing out the things that you need to be able to learn and grow and develop and build your life practice so that you can gradually be training your mind over the course of the next several years to be able to make your way to this enlightened mental state. And as you're training your mind, there's certain pollutions that'll be eliminated from the mind that'll bring you closer and closer to enlightenment. And you'll see that this is actually occurring because, as I mentioned, there's certain situations where you usually get angry or frustrated or agitated, and you'll be in those same exact situations having trained your mind, and you'll see that your mind is peaceful and joyful, and you'll know that it's these teachings that are leading you to that improved condition of mind. So I'm really pleased that you guys are here and interested to learn these teachings. I'm going to guide you through the class from 9 a.m. is when we usually start each day, and then we finish up around 3 p.m., taking an hour and a half lunch break each day. And the way that we start our classes is we start with a meditation. So I'm going to start each morning with a meditation. Even today, we're going to start with a meditation. I just was interested in sharing with you guys the perspective of helping you to understand that don't believe anything that you're learning here this week, because that's not going to help you. So starting off at the very beginning, I'm going to guide you in a meditation session, and you're not believing about this. You're actually learning it and practicing it to be able to see how it works for yourself. The way that I start our meditation is I start with some chanting to ease us into the meditation. If you'd like to see these chants that I do, they're on laminated sheets over there on the cabinet. You can get one if you like. I'm actually going to be teaching the chanting this afternoon. But for now, if you'd like to just see the chants that I do, and you're welcome to chant along if you like, these chants are in the Pali language. The Pali language is the original source language of the teachings of the Buddha, but it has English translations on it as well. So you'll see the English translations. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory, because everything that he taught was oral. Nothing was written down during his lifetime, because the technology to write things down didn't exist in that region of the world. So they had to chant or recite his teachings orally in order to commit them to memory. So every 2 weeks, his students would come together and recite his teachings. This is how they were able to remember them. So these chants that we're chanting, this isn't a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony or worship. This isn't prayer or anything like that. There's nothing mystical or magical here about these chants. The way that they originated is just to help people remember the teachings. I think that these chants that we're chanting actually weren't even created by the Buddha. They were probably created by his students, either during his life or after his death. Because if you read the English translations, you'll see that there's a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And because of that, I'm quite confident that the Buddha didn't produce these himself. He didn't create them, because if he went around saying, here, chant these chants to me out of respect for me, this would be like ego and arrogance. And a person who's gotten to enlightenment, they no longer have an ego. They no longer have that arrogance and putting themselves above people. So I suspect his students created these either during his life or after his death, because if you learn from a teacher how to move from the anger and the sadness and the frustration and all these other discontent feelings to this mental state that is where the mind is peaceful and joyful, and it's a permanent mental state, and this teacher didn't want anything from you, didn't expect anything from you, you probably have a lot of respect and gratitude for that person too. So I suspect his students created these either during his life or after his death. So I chant these as a way to ease into the meditation and actually get more benefit out of the meditation itself. And this afternoon, I'm going to guide you guys through to learn how to chant these so that you can learn and chant along and understand how to actually chant these. But for now, we'll just kind of chant them. If you'd like to chant along, you're more than welcome to. You'll hear me chanting them. And then this afternoon, you can learn them. After the chanting, I'm going to come in with some guidance. You're going to hear me guiding you during the meditation for about 5 minutes or so. I'll be instructing you in the meditation and guiding you at the same time. Then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet. We're just all meditating together. And those of us here at the temple, everyone online, will just all be meditating together. I'm sure you're going to hear occasional sounds like maybe a car going past or a bird chirping or a dog barking, because you can't be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. And as long as you don't have a craving for permanent quietness, when you hear this sound, this impermanence of the sound, you won't be frustrated, you won't be annoyed. But if you're having a craving and a longing, a yearning for permanent silence, when you hear a sound, you'll be frustrated, you'll be annoyed, but you can let that go and just realize that you're in an impermanent world and things are going to be constantly changing, and you're not going to be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. So after that period of time where we're just meditating together, then at the end of that, we're going to come out of the meditation with some more chanting. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to the course, helping you understand what I'm going to be teaching you throughout the week. Then I'm going to teach you the life story of the Buddha so that you can understand this individual, the Buddha, and understand a bit about his life. We're going to then take a mid-morning break. Then we're going to learn about what is enlightenment so that you can understand what enlightenment is in this mental state of enlightenment. We're going to take about an hour and a half lunch break. And then when we come back this afternoon, I'm going to teach you chanting so that you'll understand how to do the chanting. So if you'd like to join along in the meditation, there's 4 different positions that the Buddha taught. And by the end of this particular course, I will have taught you all 4 positions. There's seated, lying, standing, and walking positions. But let me just give you some guidance on the seated position, because this is how oftentimes students are first starting out. That if you're in a chair or sitting on the floor, maybe if you're at home, you're in a wheelchair or a couch or a bench or a sofa or something like that, you can really sit however you're comfortable. But I'll just give you a little bit of guidance to help you get started. That if you're on the floor, you might have some cushions under your rear. This will kind of help soften your seat. And then oftentimes people like to cross their legs because this will help you to sit comfortably, but it's really up to you. You can sit however you like. There's not just one particular way to actually sit. But if you do cross your legs, you're interested in them not being so tight, because if they're real tight, it'll impede the circulation, and you would like there to not be any pain in the lower body. So you might just lightly bring your legs together. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets the hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, and that also helps the circulation to flow. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. But not everybody's going to find this comfortable. This isn't about everyone doing it the same way. So if you'd like to use this, you can. But there's other options as well. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you can really put your hands and arms wherever you like. But these are just some options for you. The upper body should be erect with the sternum up and the shoulders back. That's going to help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you are real rigid, the mind can be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be erect with the sternum up and the shoulders back. Not only will it keep the mind attentive and alert, but it'll make it easier for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to ease us into the meditation with some chanting. You guys are welcome to join along, and then I'm going to come back in with the guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakhato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatavap Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavato bhagavate. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanhang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusranang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Okay, this is called breathing mindfulness meditation. I'm going to be teaching you guys this about tomorrow afternoon. You're going to have an opportunity to experience it 3 times before I actually teach it to you. So here I'm just kind of guiding you and instructing you in the meditation. But on Tuesday afternoon, I'm actually going to be teaching you the ins and outs of meditation. And then you'll actually be able to learn it better after having experienced it 3 different times. So we're going to be doing this each morning and each afternoon. We're going to be doing some meditation together. But then on Tuesday, I'll be teaching it to you. What I'm going to do now is just introduce you to the course so that you'll understand what it is that you're going to be learning over the next 5 days and where it's going to help you to get to. But first, let me just share with you guys some contact information. This is my contact information. If you guys would like to contact me for any reason, either during or after the course, you're more than welcome to contact me. If you're coming to class, that's great. You'll be here, you'll learn. If you're not coming to class, that's fine too. You don't have to contact me and tell me. I'm not taking attendance for anybody. So if you're here, great, I'll teach you. If you're not here, that's okay too. So feel free to come and go in the class as you like. It's up to you whether you learn any particular aspects of what I'm sharing with you. But this contact information is more for after the course because you're going to need guidance and help well beyond this course. You're not going to be able to get to enlightenment in 5 days, right? So if you'd like to contact me for any reason, you can use this. And it's on our website too. If you go to our website, you'll find all this contact information. Okay, so in terms of the way the class is structured or the course is structured, today, of course, we're doing welcome and just kind of introducing you to the course. The course itself, the way it's scheduled each day is in the morning at 9 a.m., we're going to be starting with chanting and meditation each day. Like today, I gave you guys kind of like a little intro, just kind of explaining to you that it's important that you don't believe the teachings, that you cultivate wisdom. But in the future, each morning at 9 a.m., we're just going to start with chanting and meditation right away. So the chanting sheets will be over there on the cabinet, and you can just pick one up if you like on your way in, and we'll do chanting and meditation. Slowly but surely, I'm going to be building you up to about a 30-minute meditation. Over the course of the 5 days, we'll slowly increase this meditation to be longer and longer and longer, so you can get to the point where you're meditating 30 minutes each meditation session. Because at 9:30, that's where I'm going to start talking about the teachings. Some people refer to this as a Dhamma talk. The word Dhamma in Pali means teachings, but to say teachings talk, it doesn't really kind of sound normal in English. So this is where we're going to have a talk, right? I think of these as discussions. I don't think of it as like a sermon or a lecture or anything like this. It's more of a discussion. It's me helping you to understand the teachings, sharing those with you, you asking me questions to be able to get clarification of the teachings and anything that I'm sharing. So it's more like a discussion as opposed to like anything else. Then somewhere around 12 o'clock, we'll be taking a lunch break. There's going to be a mid-morning break in here. Usually around 10:30 or 11, I kind of take a mid-morning break because there's usually a topic in the morning and then there's one after our mid-morning break. Then we usually take a lunch around 12, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later. It just depends on what we're teaching. Then we usually come back around 1:30, but each day before we go to lunch, I'll let you know what time we're coming back from lunch, so you'll know when to come back. And then after our lunch break, we will do some, usually learning about meditation or something like that, and then we'll generally finish up around 3. So this is kind of our schedule. And when we go to lunch, you're welcome to go out and get lunch anywhere you like. You're welcome to use the facilities outside the classroom. You see there's tables over there. You can even come in here and relax if you like. Some people like to do a little bit of yoga or meditation or even taking a nap or taking a rest. You're welcome to do that. You might even see me taking a nap during lunch from time to time. So feel free to use this space however you like. This space doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to anybody. It's everybody's to use. It's like a community center. So feel free to come here and use the space as much as you like. And then, as I mentioned, on the 5th day, I invite students out to a field trip. It's kind of like a classroom without walls, where for 4 days you'll be learning here in this classroom. But then on the 5th day, if you'd like to go out on this field trip, on Friday, we go to Wat Umong and Wat Doi Satep, which is a forest temple and a temple up on the mountain. And I tour you guys around and teaching you the artwork, the architecture, and the symbolism of the temples so that the temple can kind of come to life for you. Instead of just walking through the temple and like, oh, that's pretty, I think I'll take a picture. Oh, that's beautiful, let me take a picture. You'll actually understand what it is that's going on in these temples. So I'll walk you around and teach you all the ins and outs of a temple. So this is kind of our structure of how we do each day. And then in terms of what I'm basing the course off of, is it's this book. It's titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. You can actually get this book for free if you like. I'm not going to be teaching you the entire book in this course, but we're going to be focusing on specific chapters. This book, the way you get it is you can go to our website and you can download it for free. You can take it and go print it if you like. There's plenty of print shops in Thailand that'll print these for you. You can get a printed version here by just reimbursing us for the printing cost. You'll see them around. You can just reimburse us for what it cost us to be able to print it. Or if you like, if your country has access to Amazon, it's on Amazon, so you can get it from Amazon if you'd like. I'm going to be teaching these chapters 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 19. These are the ones that we're going to be learning in part of this course. But in order to really build a really strong foundation, you would like to be able to learn the entire book. And some students tell me they read this book 8, 12 different times, right? I've had some students that have been learning with me for many years, and they will read it that many times, and they tell me every single time they read it, they learn something new. So if you get this book in any of these formats, either PDF, Kindle, or print version, you can be reading it and accessing it for multiple months as you journey on the path to enlightenment. It's the first book of a 13-book series. So there's 13 individual books, and this is the first one. This is the one where students really start with. In terms of what you're going to be learning in the course is we're going to start off here in a moment with helping you understand the life story of Gotama Buddha, because if you're going to take this journey towards enlightenment and understanding the teachings of the Buddha, you'd probably like to know a bit about his life before you start that journey. So I start this course with helping you to understand his life story so you understand a bit about this individual that we refer to as the Buddha. Then after our mid-morning break, we're going to come back and I'm going to help you understand enlightenment. What is enlightenment? Because if you're going to take this journey to enlightenment, you'd like to know a bit about it, because then you can decide whether it's even something that you're interested in progressing towards. It's kind of like if I came to you and I said, hey, would you like to go to Chiang Rai? The first thing you probably say is, what is Chiang Rai? Right? And then I'd be like, oh, it's the city up north of Chiang Mai. It's about 3 hours north, and they've got this, and they've got that, and they've got this. And you're like, that sounds interesting. Yeah, I'd like to go. And now you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to Chiang Rai. And then once you're in Chiang Rai, you'll know that you're there because you know a little bit about it. So the same thing with understanding enlightenment. If you know what it is, you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And then once you get to enlightenment, you'll know that your mind is actually enlightened. But if you didn't understand what enlightenment is, how would you ever be able to navigate your way to it or know that you actually have attained enlightenment if you didn't even know what it was? So I'm going to help you to understand what it is. Then tomorrow, I'm going to start off with something called the Four Noble Truths. This is how you establish what's called right view. This is where in 4 simple statements, you're going to be able to understand the problem in your mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the complete solution of how to actually solve the problem that the Buddha discovered. This is a teaching, and just like all the other teachings of the Buddha, that you can independently verify, and you can be able to see the truth for yourself. This is where students can have a real breakthrough to understanding what's causing their anger and their sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, because how could you actually eliminate these feelings if you didn't know what was causing them? So I'm going to walk you through in a way that you can independently verify the Four Noble Truths. This is the real starting point for students on the path to enlightenment. Then I'm going to teach you what's called the Eightfold Path. This is the path for all humans to enlightenment. When we talk about enlightenment and the journey to enlightenment, this is the core central teaching. This is the path to enlightenment, the Eightfold Path. These are 8 individual factors that you're learning and you're dialing into your life closer and closer and closer. And this is what's going to help produce the enlightened mental state. So you need to know this teaching inside and out, backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. So I'm going to walk you through that over the course of the morning. Then on Wednesday morning, I'm going to teach you what's called transforming the 3 poisons: craving, anger, and ignorance. This is where we're going to kind of broaden your understanding of what's going on in the mind and really deepen your understanding of what's going on and what the Buddha discovered in the unenlightened mind and how to actually solve it. I'm not just going to explain to you the problems in the mind. I'm going to explain to you how to solve it and how to fix it. And when you implement the teachings, you'll be able to see that it's actually working. So I'm going to teach you how to transform the mind away from these 3 poisons or these 3 unwholesome roots, and then cultivating the wholesome roots in your mind so you can experience more and more improvement in your day-to-day life. Then I'm going to teach you what's called the 5 precepts. This is a householder's guide to daily practice. This is where you're learning about 5 impactful decisions that you could make either wisely or unwisely, and it's going to produce either wholesome results for you or unwholesome results for you. Some people have been taught that the Buddha said, no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants. The Buddha didn't teach that. That sounds like rules. It sounds like black and white. It sounds like commandments. The Buddha doesn't teach that way. So I'm going to actually be teaching you these teachings using the original words of the Buddha so you can see the way he teaches, and he has much more illuminating language that's going to be able to help you understand what he's teaching, why he's teaching it, and how to integrate it into your day-to-day life. Then on Thursday, I'm going to teach you what is Karma and how does it affect me. This is the main natural law that you're awakening to. There's nothing mystical or magical here. It's not superstition. It's not punishments and rewards. It's helping you to be able to see this cause and effect, or this action and result. So I'm going to be walking you guys through in a way that you'll be able to understand what this natural law is and how to extinguish your unwholesome karma. So I'll help you guys with that. Then I'm going to be teaching you what is is merit. This is a unique type of wholesome karma that you're going to need to learn about and actually generate. Then I'm going to teach you continued support on the path to enlightenment, how to actually continue your journey beyond this course, because the time that we spend together will surely help you if you're paying attention, if you're learning the teachings, if you're actively, eagerly listening to the teachings and investigating them and learning them, you'll be able to benefit. But if you're not paying attention and you're not really listening and understanding what it is that's being taught, you're not going to get any benefit from the time that you're here. But if you're actively learning, you'll be able to learn and grow and develop on this path and make more and more progress on the path. But you're going to need support beyond this particular course, so I'm going to teach you how to get that support. Then over the course of the week, I'm going to be sharing with you these meditation of how to learn and practice breathing mindfulness meditation in the positions of seated, lying, standing, and walking, because you're going to need these at different times. It's kind of like building your tool belt so that you can employ the different tools that you need at different times. And then you're going to be learning Buddhist chanting and practicing that as well. And then by the time we get to the end of the course, I'm going to teach you how to integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life. Because one of the challenges that people experience when they go away to retreats and things like this is how to take what they learned in the course and be able to integrate it into their day-to-day life and actually get the real benefit out of it. So I'm going to teach you how to integrate what you learned here into your day-to-day life so you can continue to get benefit more and more and more. So do you guys have any questions on the course or how it's structured or anything like that? No questions? Okay, so what I'm going to do to get us started is I'm going to share with you the life story of the Buddha. This is chapter 19 in our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This chapter is titled The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death. And this is where I share a little bit of the life story of the Buddha in the book, because it's helpful to understand about this individual's life. And it was sickness, aging, and death that motivated him on his journey to enlightenment. He was really interested to understand what enlightenment is and how to attain it because of this sickness, aging, and death. And you'll understand that more when I explain to you his life story. The way that I have organized this talk is in terms of his birth, his early life, his journey to enlightenment, his teaching career, and then we'll talk about sickness, aging, and death and what he discovered there. So typically the way that I teach is I will teach for maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then I'll open up to questions for students to ask questions, and then I'll teach another 15, 20, 30 minutes and open up to questions, another 15, 20, 30 minutes, open up to questions. But with this particular topic, it's usually better if I just teach it all the way through and then open up to any questions at the end. If you guys would ever like to ask questions here, we have microphones in the white bowl. All you need to do is get a microphone, press the gray button. You're going to see the lights come on, and then just hold it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online. If you talk here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And for anybody online, you can ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raising your hand in Zoom and asking any and all questions that you like. So here, the birth of the Buddha, he was born in 563 BC. This was over 2,500 years ago. And he was born in an area that we call Nepal, Lumbini, Nepal. But back then it wasn't Nepal, right? That this is kind of a new thing that the lines have been drawn and we have certain countries. Back then there was just a bunch of different kingdoms, and there were different kings that were ruling over the different land. So this individual, Siddhartha Gotama was his name at birth, was born into a royal family. His mother was the queen and his dad was the king. And when he was born, it was to this queen who needed to be taken back to her homeland. The way that life worked during this period of time is that if you were married and you were pregnant, when you were about to give birth, they would take you back to your homeland. So they organized a caravan to take her back home. So that way when she delivers the baby, she would be around her brothers and sisters, her mom, her dad. People would be able to help her to be able to birth and actually take care of the baby. So they organized this caravan to start taking her back home. And on the journey back home, she ends up going into labor pains. And they stop the caravan and she gets out and goes over to a tree and she starts holding on to the branch of the tree, trying to deliver the baby. She's trying to deliver the baby in the standing position because the baby couldn't couldn't come out of the normal birthing canal. She's standing up trying to get the baby out from the normal birthing canal. And since the baby couldn't come out, it eventually breaks through the side of her stomach. And because of this, she ends up dying 7 days after the birth, which was not uncommon 2,500 years ago. Women oftentimes would die. It was a very common thing. Even children would die during childbirth. Nowadays, we have medical technology. If this was nowadays, his mom would have had a C-section. They would have been just fine. No big deal, right? But back then, they didn't have that technology. So she ends up dying 7 days after his birth. And they had cultural protocols in place that if you as a woman would die during your childbirth and your children would live, then your siblings would adopt your child as your own. So she had an older sister that adopted Siddhartha Gotama. So essentially his aunt became his stepmother. And this is the individual who raised him as her own child throughout the rest of his life. It's said that at the time of his birth that he walked 7 steps, lotus flowers were blossoming under his feet, and he spoke and he said, "This will be my last birth." I don't think this is actually true. I think this is an embellishment of the story, because if this was actually true, the next part of the story that I'm going to share with you wouldn't have actually been needed. One of the things that happens throughout history when someone like a Buddha is in existence and they do such amazing things, as time goes on, they tend to kind of embellish the story to make him look even better than he already was. But we don't need to embellish the story of a Buddha. A Buddha does amazing things during their life, and we don't need to embellish his story. So I don't think that this part of the story is actually true, that this child was walking 7 steps immediately from birth, lotus flowers were blossoming, and this child was talking. Because if that was true, the next part of the story wouldn't actually be needed. The next part of the story is that his father, being the king, was interested to know what his son was going to become. So he summoned advisors. There was 108 advisors that he asked to come visit him and essentially tell him what his son was going to become. These are like fortune tellers. And 107 of these individuals told the father that your son was going to be a great leader. He was going to be a great monarch. He was going to rule over your kingdom and expand your kingdom far and wide. And his father was like, yeah, that's my boy. Okay, yeah, great. That's what I want, right? Well, there's this last advisor who comes in. It says, "Sir, I'm so sorry. I need to apologize to you. I heard what the other advisors said, and they're 100% correct. Your son is going to be a great leader, but not in the way that you think. He's not going to be a monarch or a ruler. He's actually going to be a spiritual leader." And his father didn't like this. So his father decides to sequester him into the palace and never let him go outside. Because his thought was that if his son went outside in the kingdom, he would get involved in worldly affairs and he would be interested to be a spiritual leader. So he was interested in kind of wooing him into the ways of being a monarch. And he felt like if he kept him inside the palace, that he could kind of lavish gifts on him and give him this lifestyle that he wouldn't be able to experience otherwise. And he would never leave to not be a king because he had such a wonderful lifestyle. So he kept his son in the palace and he gave him, like wonderful food, wonderful entertainment, great fabrics, beautiful women bathing him and taking care of him. Everything you can imagine that a royal father, a king, could give to their son, he gave his son all these things in order to kind of get him hooked to this lifestyle of being a king and a monarch. Well, at the age of 29, Siddhartha Gotama realizes that he's about to become the king, and he needed to understand what was going on in the kingdom, that he was going to be ruling over these people, and he had never actually been outside the kingdom. And the way that he knew that he was about to become the king is because during this time frame, you would become the king when you turned 30, and your dad would retire and essentially be there to teach you and guide you along the way as you were becoming the king. So Siddhartha Gotama at the age of 29, realizing he had never been outside the palace, decides that he would like to go outside the kingdom and see what was going on so that he could rule over this kingdom more in a better way. So he goes outside the kingdom or outside the palace without his father realizing it and without his father knowing. And he takes with him his royal attendant. This is like his chief of staff, the person that he has the most trust in. This is like his main confidant. And he goes outside the royal palace and he has what's called the 4 observations. observations. These 4 observations are that he sees a sickly person, an aging person, a dead corpse, and he sees a roaming ascetic, someone who's given up worldly life in order to seek a better understanding of life. And this is what we refer to as the 4 observations, because this is what motivated the Buddha to actually go on this journey. So he sees this sickly person, and when he sees the sickly person, he sees this disgruntledness and this frustration around this person, and he has to turn to his royal attendant and ask, like, what's going on over there? And he's like, this person is having difficulties to sustain their life because they're sick, they're ill, they can't work, their family doesn't have the basic resources that they need in order to sustain their life. And this was very impactful to Siddhartha Gotama because he didn't understand that, because he lived this life of luxury in the royal palace, and he didn't realize that there was people in the kingdom that were struggling, because that's not what his life was for 29 years. So this had a real impact on him. Then he saw an aging person, kind of an older, decrepit person, having difficulties walking, having all kinds of pains. And once again, there was all this disgruntledness and frustration around this person. And he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? And he's like, same thing. Like, this person can't get the basic necessities that they need in order to sustain their life. And then this has a real impact on Siddhartha Gotama. Then he sees this dead corpse, and he sees the family grieving and being sorrowful. And he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? And he's like, this family lost their family member, and now they're not going to be able to have the basic necessities that they need, because that was one of the main people who was providing the support for them to be able to sustain their life. And then he sees this roaming ascetic, someone who's given up worldly life, doing meditation and things like this to be able to get to enlightenment and figure out this life and how things happen in the world. And he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? And he's like, that person is trying to figure out all of this. They're trying to figure out the sickness, aging, and death, and why this is occurring, and why we keep experiencing this over and over and over again. And this has a real impact on Siddhartha Gotama, and he realizes that that's what he would like to do. The way that he sees the kingdom is he sees that it's full of misery and despair. He was living this life of luxury and all these central pleasures in the palace, and when he goes out in the kingdom, he sees a very stark difference, a big contrast to the life that he was experiencing, and he thinks of the kingdom as being nothing but misery and despair, and he wasn't interested in ruling over misery and despair. So instead of being the king, he decides to step away from that, and he decides that he's going to try to figure out why sickness, aging, and death is occurring over and over and over again, and how to help people get out of that. So he decides that he's going to leave the royal palace and go on this journey to get to enlightenment and try to figure out how to get to enlightenment. At this time, he has a wife and he has a young infant son, and he basically leaves in the middle of the night. He takes with him his horse and his royal confidant, his royal attendant, because he didn't understand the mind as well as he did by the time he got to enlightenment, but he understood it enough that he felt like if he said goodbye, if he hugged and kissed his wife and let her know what he was going to be doing, that he wouldn't be able to leave. So he kind of leaves in the middle of the night without her realizing it. And he leaves and he goes on this journey to try to get to enlightenment. So now as he leaves, he takes with him his favorite horse and his royal attendant. And he gets to a certain point where he turns his horse loose, gives it to his royal attendant. His royal attendant leaves and he cuts off his hair. At this time, he has this long, beautiful, flowing hair, because this is how they could determine whether you were in the royal family or not. If you went out into the kingdom and you had this long, beautiful, flowing hair, they knew you were a member of the royal family, because it was only the royal family that would be able to have this long, beautiful, flowing hair. Those of us that were just commoners, we wouldn't be able to have that long, beautiful, flowing hair, because we'd be working in the fields, we'd be doing labor jobs, our hair would get all tangled up, get knotted, we wouldn't have the time to shampoo it and comb it and take care of it. But the royal family had servants and they had time and money that they could just sit back and comb their hair and take care of their hair. So people would know that you were a member of the royal family if you went outside and you had this long, beautiful, flowing hair. Nowadays, we just take a picture of the king or the queen and we just put it all over the kingdom, or we put it on the money, and you know who is the king or who is the queen by what's on the money or what the pictures are around in the kingdom. But that technology didn't exist during that time frame, so they needed a way to determine who was the royal family. So that was that long, beautiful, flowing hair. So by cutting off his hair It's basically like, I'm never going back, because he'd been growing this hair for 29 years. Nobody would ever be convinced that he was actually the king by cutting off his hair. So cutting off his hair is like, I'm never going back. There's other things that this does as well, and this is the reason why people cut off their hair in some cases in order to make their way to enlightenment. You don't need to cut off your hair in order to get to enlightenment, but it's one thing that some people choose to do. So you guys will understand that tomorrow, or in other parts of your journey to enlightenment, when we start talking about the teachings and why that is. But just understand there's other reasons why the Buddha ultimately ended up cutting off his hair. But he's not yet a Buddha in this story. He's still Siddhartha Gotama, because he hasn't gotten to enlightenment yet. So he ends up deciding to go take up training with two different teachers. He first trains with the first teacher, then he trains with the other teacher. And these teachers were claiming that they had figured out what it takes to get to enlightenment. So he studies with these two teachers. He hangs himself upside down from trees. He lays on beds of nails. He pierces his body with metal implements. He starves himself. These are things that were being taught in order to be able to get to enlightenment. The thought was that if you could cause physical pain to the body, and your mind could overcome that physical pain, that you would be able to get to enlightenment. And he studies with these two teachers, the first one for 1 year and then the second one for the next year. And at the end of each one of these years, the teacher had said to him that you have mastered my teachings, that you can now go off and share my teachings. You're a master of my teachings. In just 1 year, he was able to do that with the first teacher. And he realized that his mind wasn't any more peaceful after having mastered this person's teachings than it was when he was in the palace. So he knew he hadn't gotten to enlightenment. So he went to this other teacher. And this other teacher was essentially teaching him the same things, to cause pain to the physical body, starving the body, hanging upside down from trees, laying on beds of nails, things like this. And once again, this teacher said, hey, you've mastered my teachings after just 1 year, and now you can go share my teachings. And he was frustrated with the whole thing because he realized that his mind wasn't any more peaceful than it was when he was in the palace. So he decides to leave from these two teachers and goes off on his own in the forest. When he's in the forest, the only things that he knows how to do are the same things that these teachers were teaching him. So that's what he would continue to do. He took it all the way to the extreme, to the point where he would eat just 1 grain of rice per day. And he was trying to get to enlightenment this way by causing physical pain to the body. He was so malnourished that he was sitting on the edge of the forest and he was basically skin and bones, and he was meditating. And there was an individual who walked by, a woman with her young daughter, and they see that this individual is about to die because he's just skin and bones. And they beg and they plead with him to please eat some rice. And he reluctantly accepts this rice and he starts eating this rice. And when he's eating this rice, he has a realization, and that ultimately he describes as the middle way. He realizes that when he was in the palace, he was living this life of sensual pleasures where he had everything and anything, all kinds of food and entertainment, beautiful fabrics that he would wear, and all these other things. But then when he left the royal palace, he swung all the way over to the other side, where he was disparaging the body, and he was doing these damaging things and causing physical pain to the body. And none of these actually leaded to enlightenment. It didn't lead to the peace and joy. So he needed to come to the middle and be able to practice this middle way. And what he decides to do is he starts to eat in moderation, where he starts to gradually start eating and kind of practicing what we refer to as the middle way. And over the next 4 years, he figures out how to get to enlightenment through training his own mind, doing the work on his own. He figured out how to get to enlightenment. And after a period of time of the total of 6 years, he ends up getting to enlightenment at the age of 35. And he goes to this tree and he kind of hangs out at this tree for 7 weeks to determine whether or not he was going to share his teachings or not, because he wasn't quite sure whether he was interested in sharing his teachings, because what he had to teach was radically different than what other people were doing at the time. At the time, people were hanging themselves upside down from trees and starving themselves and things like this, but his teachings were very different than that. So he hangs out at this tree for 7 weeks and contemplates of whether or not he should actually share his teachings with other people. Well, we know what he actually did is he did end up sharing his teachings. And the way that he did that is he ended up coming back to that part of the place where he was at, where he was studying with those original two teachers, and he encounters 4 of his previous classmates and 1 of his previous teachers. And when he encounters these 5 people, they start laughing at him. They start mocking him and they start joking him. And they thought that he had given up on the path to enlightenment, because in their mind, they thought in order to get to enlightenment, you needed to be disparaging the physical body, that you needed to be starving yourself, hanging yourself upside down from trees. But here comes this individual who's well nourished. He has meat on his bones. He looks bright. He looks cheerful. He looks glad and radiant. And they thought he had given up on the path to enlightenment because he looked so healthy. And they started laughing at him and joking him and mocking him. And he understood that he was enlightened. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're not going to be affected by people joking you and mocking you. Right now, you might be affected by that. You might be frustrated or irritated or annoyed. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't experience that. Even when someone's joking you and mocking you, you would be completely peaceful and joyful. You still might not choose to hang out with those people, but you wouldn't be affected within your mind. So he wasn't affected by this joking and mocking. So he walks over to where they're at. He sits down on the ground and he takes his hand and he touches the earth. This is where he performs one and only miracle. It's the only miracle he ever performed during his life. And when he touches the earth, animals come to where he's at. So deer and squirrels and birds and lizards and alligators and things like this, all these animals start coming to where he's at. And these 5 people see this miracle and they're like, okay, you have my attention. What do you have to say? And, they sit down and he delivers what's called the 4 Noble Truths. This is what you're going to learn tomorrow. You're going to learn these 4 individual statements that you can understand the problem in the mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. In 4 simple statements, you can have a real breakthrough to understanding what's causing the difficulties and struggles in your own mind, so that way you can actually eliminate the problems that the mind is experiencing. So in these 4 simple statements, these individuals were able to independently verify what it was that he was actually teaching, and they could see that he had discovered what it took to get to enlightenment. So they were interested in learning with him because they could independently see that he had discovered what it took, because of his teachings were so clear and so concise and so precise. So his teachings aren't based on belief. You're learning and practicing his teachings. You need to actively learn and actively understand them to be able to make your way to enlightenment through cultivation of wisdom. So these first 5 students end up being the ones who are learning and growing and developing at the beginning. But then his community just kept growing and growing and growing. More and more students are learning with him. And over the course of his life, where he dies at the age of 80, there's countless people who end up learning with him and getting to enlightenment. So for 45 years, from the age of 35 until 80, he ends up teaching and countless people get to enlightenment. He dies in 483 BC, which is a little over 2,500 years ago. He lived for 80 years, and which was a very long time, 2,500 years ago, to be able to live that long. Even today, if somebody lives that long, that's a pretty long time. So 2,500 years ago, that was a very long time to be able to live. And during that time frame, countless people got to enlightenment. And you can know when your mind is enlightened because your mind's peaceful and joyful. You don't experience any anger, or frustration, or agitation, or annoyance any longer. It'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You can see the condition of your mind is drastically improved. And then shortly after his death, they end up preserving his teachings in a way that was able to then help countless more people get to enlightenment after his death. So these are the 3 primary criteria of what make a Buddha, is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So Siddhartha Gotama meets these 3 criteria, and this is how that we know that he was an actual Buddha. So they end up preserving his teachings, and he lived in an area that we refer to as Northeast India. And these sites of where he got to enlightenment, where he was born, where he died, and these kinds of things, these have all been preserved. you can actually go to these places and actually visit them and see where they're at. We're actually taking a trip this year. We're leading a tour and a retreat where we're going to go visit all these different sites within India on a 12-day kind of retreat. If you guys would like to go, you'll see the details on our website. So the Buddha was motivated by this sickness, aging, and death. He saw this grief and this misery and this despair. And what he discovered in his journey to enlightenment is the reason why this is occurring is that because the mind craves permanence, when you experience impermanence, the mind doesn't like that. So if you crave permanent health, when the body experiences sickness, you'll be frustrated, you'll be agitated and annoyed because you want that permanent health. But this body is impermanent. It can't experience permanent health. Or if you want permanent youthfulness and you're craving it, you're longing and yearning for it, when this body is experiencing impermanence, you'll be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. Or if you crave permanent life, as you get closer and closer to death, you will struggle and you have a very painful death because you're holding on, wanting life to be permanent. And now when you get closer and closer to death, the mind doesn't like that. So the mind in the unenlightened state is craving permanence. When you live in an impermanent world, you're not going to experience permanent health or permanent youthfulness or permanent life. It's just not possible. So because you were born, you will experience sickness, aging, and death. It's impossible for you to not experience that. As long as there's birth, there's going to be sickness, aging, and death. But if you crave permanent youthfulness or permanent health or permanent life, then when you're experiencing this impermanence, your mind's going to be frustrated and agitated or annoyed. So the Buddha figured out how to train the mind to get to the point where it's no longer experiencing those difficulties and struggles through training the mind. And you're going to learn about that throughout this course of how to actually train the mind to get to a point where you're not craving permanence, wanting or expecting or longing and yearning for things to be a certain way. Because when you get things your way, you feel happy, you feel excited, you feel elated because people are doing things your way. But when people don't do things your way, when you're not getting what you want or expect, your mind will experience the struggles and the difficulties, the painful feelings like sadness, anger, and frustration. So the Buddha's teachings will guide you and be able to understand this and train your mind and be able to help you to be able to get to the point where your mind can be peaceful and joyful permanently. Do you guys have any questions on the life story of the Buddha? Okay, let me see if we have any questions online here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So what I'm going to end with is just this, is that no one ever said life would be easy, but it's also not supposed to be tough. Learning Gotama Buddha's teachings is not easy, but learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha will ensure that life is not tough. Because in the unenlightened state, life can feel kind of miserable sometimes, right? Of course, there's things you enjoy. There's certain aspects of life that you keep a positive mind. You keep a positive outlook on life. But there's been certain challenges and difficulties in your life where you've experienced certain miseries or certain sorrow, certain grief and despair. And what I'm sharing with you is that you can get rid of all of this. It's not easy, but it's not difficult either. It's not tough, because living in the unenlightened state, that's really difficult. That's really tough because you're going to experience different sorrow and grief and pain and displeasure. But what I'm sharing with you is you can escape all of this. You can get to the point where the mind's always peaceful and it's always joyful. You just need to be able to train your mind and understand how to do that. So learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha is not easy, but it's also not tough. Right? Life isn't supposed to be easy, but it's also not supposed to be tough either. You can get to the point where life isn't a struggle, where it's not difficult any longer, but you need the wisdom of how to do that. And that's why I teach you to not believe any of the teachings. You guys don't have any way to independently verify what I'm sharing with you about the life story of the Buddha, other than the fact that it's in the original source teachings and you could see it there. But what the Buddha did during his life is quite amazing, that he was able to get to this enlightened mental state by himself without the help of any teachers or any guides. You're not going to be able to do that. You're going to need help from a teacher or guide. a Buddha existing in the world is very rare. It's very unique. So the last Buddha that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. He had the ability to get to enlightenment by himself, but you're not going to be able to do that because you need guidance, you need help from a teacher. He had certain aspects of his mind, certain qualities of his mind that allowed him to be able to get to enlightenment by himself, but you're going to need teachers and guides along the way because you're not an actual Buddha. So you can get to enlightenment and you'll be plenty pleased with that enlightened mental state, but you're going to need guidance along the way because you don't have the ability to figure it out by yourself. This is a very rare and unique type of individual that can figure out how to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. But as you do get to enlightenment, this is where life won't be tough for you anymore because your mind will just always be peaceful and joyful, focused and concentrated and having clarity. Your personal and professional relationships will be really blossoming. And when we come back from our break, I'm going to teach you what is enlightenment because we're going to take a little break here and give you guys a chance to talk with each other, get to know each other, stretch your legs and all these kinds of things. And then when we come back, I'm going to teach you in more detail what is enlightenment and what this mental state is. So as we go to break, I'll let you guys know that there's bathrooms in the back of the room. The last two doors in the back, those are bathrooms. You guys are welcome to use them at any time. I do take breaks throughout the course, but at any point during the class, if you're feeling like you need a bathroom break, go ahead, take a bathroom break. We even have bathrooms outside the classroom. If you go out to the parking lot, there's signs that'll take you around to the main temple bathrooms, and you're welcome to use those at any time. We even have snacks and refreshments over here that are provided by our students. So if you'd like to help yourself to any snacks or refreshments, they provide that for you guys. So you're welcome to help yourself. They're very generous to be able to share with you guys because they know coming here and learning that you might need some snacks and stuff. So they make those available for you. So feel free to dig into those all that you like. So right now is basically 10:22. So let's just call that 10:25. So let's get back together at 10:45, which will give you over 20-minute break, give you a chance to get to know each other and talk with each other. If you need to go out to the store and get any refreshments or anything of your own, you're more than welcome to do that. So thank you all for your interest to learn the teachings. Thank you for being here and being attentive and being interested to actually actively learn and grow on the path, because doing this inner work to train your mind, it's quite challenging. But after you train your mind, life is going to just get easier and easier and easier. So thank you for being dedicated to improvement of your own mind. So as I teach you this week, feel free to ask for help and ask any and all questions that you like. And we'll get back together at 10:45. So thank you for your interest to learn, and we'll see you in about 20 minutes. Okay.